Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here, seeing so many folks who are passionate and interested in learning about how we can use technology for good. So today I'm going to be talking about how we're going to be creating economic opportunity at global scale with fairness and privacy at LinkedIn. And I lead data science team at LinkedIn. It's been there for 6 years. It's really a tremendous journey, and happy to share more with folks afterwards as well. So really, my talk is going to be kind of breaking down in 3 components, talking about economic graph, which is really a digital representation of all the data that we have at LinkedIn, and also going into how we are approaching fairness and data privacy. So at LinkedIn, our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And the way that we're thinking about operationalize towards this vision is really thinking about this economic graph, which is a digital representation of all the data, which really includes about 600 million members, 30 million companies, and 20 million open jobs, and more, and so on and so forth. And really all these activities and engagements that all these entities on this economic graph are how they are interacting with each other. And we really use our data science to transform the data into many useful product and insights that we do. In particular, that we use it to help us understand how the labor market works. And we also actually partner with many global institutions and organizations across the globe to utilize this data to think about how we can make the world a better place. Institutions, organizations such as G20, the World Bank, World Economic Forum as well, and so many more. Just so that to give a sense of what our data can do, for example, we can really use our data to understand how globally talents are actually moving over time. So if I can actually, as example, let's take Chicago as example. So if I can ask the audience to give me a guess, which city do you think that Chicago has been gaining the most talents from in the past few years? Any guess? Sorry? Pennsylvania? Good guess. It's actually Urbana-Champaign. My guess is probably because UIUC is there, and that is sort of the #1 way of feeding the talents into Chicago. But then my second question is, which city do you think that Chicago is losing talent to the most? San Francisco? Is that, yeah, of course San Francisco, right? Because we are in San Francisco area. No, it's actually not. It's actually Denver. So now you can think about with the data and with the information we have, we can really help the governments and help the world, the economy to actually figure out how they can plan better, how they can plan interventions, economic policies that they can actually help create better opportunity for people who are working. So in addition to understanding the movements of global trends, but we can also actually understand a lot better in terms of the supply and demand imbalances, right? So for example, as we can see in this graph, really the demand for data science skills is really increasing across the board over the past 10 years, and more so across different geos in the United States. We can also take a much deeper look into the skills and the demand of it, and looking at the gender, how the gender gap is manifesting itself in the new skills that people are looking for, hiring, right? For example, we know that we've been talking about gender gaps across different industries, and the one that is really surprising or not surprising is thinking about the AI skills that we saw is actually the gender gap of AI skills is actually much bigger compared to the other talents across the board. And this is actually not just true across those industries where we traditionally has gender gap, but even in industries such as education and healthcare, where we traditionally have seen that to be more popular with female professionals, that the gap of AI skilled professionals within those industries is also growing. obviously, with the demand for AI skills, and we actually have been hearing about it in the previous talk as well, as the demand for AI skills is increasing, this is really concerning. So it really is going to take many of us in the room and beyond this room to make sure that the trend does not perpetuate. Okay, so that naturally leads us to the second question, which is really, if we're going to create economic opportunity for every single member of the global workforce, we're really talking about every single member. But how can we do that? That is not going to be benefiting a specific group of members, but really every single member of the global workforce. So the vision that we have, going back to LinkedIn's vision, which really means that every member includes people who are not necessarily born with large networks, who did not necessarily have a traditional education, really that encompassing every member regardless of their background and their education and all of that as well. So the way that we define what really our mission is in terms of fairness at LinkedIn is really that if we have two people that they have equal talent, they really should have equal shot at opportunities. And all these opportunities that we offer to our members on LinkedIn platform, including, for example, finding a job on LinkedIn, engage with various different content, building their network, finding mentors, getting job referrals. Can they learn with equal opportunities? Can they get endorsement with equal opportunities? Right? So all these are actually extremely challenging to do. So actually, before I go into sort of the challenges, I wanted to, I think folks here probably have heard of this algorithmic bias that was really popularized by Joy Lamborghini back 3 years ago, started with this MIT Media Lab study that they had, which really showed that if you take sort of the top 3 popular facial recognition algorithm that we have out there, and you kind of see how they are performing for different people with different demographics. And it turned out that all these top gender classifiers works really, really well in terms of their accuracy when it comes to light-skinned men, but it works not so well for dark-skinned women. And the gap is actually really big. But the key thing here is that it's actually not just the algorithms, right? And it's actually everything that we do as we are building our product. Let me just give a very simple example. So at LinkedIn, we know that obviously, if you have a very strong network, you are more likely to land on a good job, right? Because people in your network can refer you, and then so you have much better opportunities when it comes to job opportunity. So one thing that we tried, which is really about how can we also help people who don't necessarily have a large network to get those jobs as well. One thing that we found is that if we can actually push the new job that's on, new jobs that is on the platform within seconds of when they become available, when they are posted. That actually not only increased job applications, increased people's landing on jobs across the board. In particular, it is very beneficial for people who are under-networked. Right? This is not about algorithmic bias. It's actually the way that we're building our product that changes how people are interacting with the product over time. And that is going to be actually changing whether we can really increase that fairness, that opportunity, that equal opportunity for people across the board. So, like I mentioned, it's a very challenging problem of actually dealing with or addressing fairness across the board. It's primarily because there is really a multitude of views. And of course, if you're thinking about from LinkedIn's perspective, the world outside of LinkedIn actually may not be fair as well. And there's always this debate of should we talk about equal treatment or equal outcome as well. And as example, if I ask all of you to think about how, what does it mean to have a fair jobs product, right? You can say, okay, in order for the jobs product to be fair, that means for both men and women, as an example, right, that they need to have equally good job recommendations. Is it really just that? Or is it also you want them to actually apply to jobs equally? Or further down the funnel, you want them to be hired to equally good jobs that pays equally good, right? So it's really not a easy thing, and I think that is probably the hardest thing for the field of fairness, is thinking about what is the definition of that fairness that we really are shooting for. So very, very high level, share a little bit how we are approaching fairness at LinkedIn, right? Still very early, really going through these three things, which is thinking about the high level framework, thinking about what are the specific LinkedIn assets that really matters for LinkedIn to make a difference in the world of fairness, and also just creating change starting with measurement. Going to this framework, the way that we use at LinkedIn is really this equal opportunity framework that was introduced by Hart et al. Back in 2016 in their New York's paper in 2016. What it really says is that the opportunity that individual will have on LinkedIn, given their talent and effort, should really be independent of all the other attributes, such as gender, ethnicity, network, all the other demographics attributes as well. So it's going to the second one, which is really about some example of what really matters at LinkedIn. Think about LinkedIn as a professional social network, and we talk a lot about how network is able to help people getting opportunities. One thing that we studied that it turned out to be extremely valuable, which is really what we call this network structural diversity. So it's not so much about the number of connections you have on LinkedIn. It's actually the structure of your network matters a lot as well. So by studying literally hundreds of historical A/B experiments we had, we were able to really figure out a causal relationship between the diversity, the structural diversity, and people's job placement in the labor market over the past many years, right? As example, you have these two nodes who really here representing individuals on the platform. H is the one that has more connections, and I is somebody who has less connections, but because that I actually has a stronger network structural diversity, and this is what we call social capital, that is actually more likely for I to get an opportunity in the job market than for H. The third one I'm going to very quickly touch upon, which is really about measurement. If you cannot measure, you cannot improve it, right? This is something that we always talk about. So how does the distribution compare across different demographics? And I'll show one example as well. And then also, let's make sure that as we are doing our relevance ranking, let's make sure that they're representative as well. So whatever you are ranking, let's say a recruiter is doing a search on our platform, the results they get, the top results they get, should be representative of all the candidates who are eligible for that search. Also making sure that our training data is not biased. Are we having a better AUC, for example, for a female than for male, vice versa? And then can we actually correct it based on important samplings or other techniques that we have? And finally, is LinkedIn, we use the experimentation very heavily, making sure that as we are launching new product, that these new products are actually not introducing unintentional bias to our platforms as well. So just very, very briefly, here is an example of making sure that we understand the distribution of how that distribution differs across different demographics, right? For example, as we can see that students versus non-student, students actually have a larger network, but when it comes to network diversity, they're actually not as good, right? Which is really, if you're thinking about how can we help students getting that job opportunities after their school, is how can we also helping them build not just a large network, but a more diverse network. Okay, now let's go to our sort of a final section of my talk today, which is talking about data privacy. So one thing that I think it's really important for us all to realize that, obviously with GDPR, with CCPA, I think the audience is not, everyone should be very familiar with how important that privacy is, right? But I think it's really important for us to realize that if our goal is really to create opportunity for every single member, of the global workforce, and we want to do it in a fair way. And we cannot do it in a fair way unless we can actually utilize the data that people trust us with in a trustworthy way, right? So that's why the privacy is such important aspect of creating that opportunity for people as well. So again, like our mission of data privacy is really about how we can utilize data while protecting the privacy of our members. I guess the why, to an extent that folks again probably are very familiar with some very preliminary, I would call it, techniques when it comes to protecting data privacy, such as obfuscation, right? Like, hey, why don't we just take the names? These are PII information. It's just, obfuscated, and then we're done with it. And it's actually really not true, because it's not sufficient to really guard against attacks, such as reconstruction attacks and differencing attacks, right? Like, as an example, is that 87% of the United States population is actually can be uniquely identified just by birthday, gender, and zip code, right? Like, this is like, if you think about gender by itself, it's not PII, like date of birth and then zip by itself, you're thinking, hey, there's so many population. But it turned out that when you're having this combination, and even if you erase people's name, you can still uniquely identify them. And there are numerous research that has done in the past 10 years where many of these companies, when they release a large data set, they think that they obfuscated it, but it turned out that the researchers can really back engineer many of the privacy information out of it, such as the Netflix competition, if people remember that, and then some of the data set that AOL, NIH, and Facebook released as well. So the way that we approach this, that's why we really invest very heavily in this data privacy technique that's called differential privacy. So at a very high level, differential privacy is actually pretty simple, right? The idea is very simple. So you have a bunch of data, and you have your algorithm, and you try to learn something about the data. But you wanted to learn it in a way, you wanted the algorithms to be in a way such that if I remove a single individuals from this entire data set, what you can learn from this data set, with or without this single member, should be very similar, right? So you can see that this distribution curve is actually really, the difference is very small. And then obviously it's research that's done for several years now, have a very, very strong mathematical guarantee. That's really what makes differential privacy a very appealing approach as we protecting people's privacy. So the way that we are approaching this is really by building a suite of differential privacy tools. This would involve, obviously, differential privacy models, that is the local model, and also the trusted curator model that is able to help us as we are sharing data externally using, let's say, and I'll give a couple of examples as well, either that it be internal employees accessing data, or static dashboards, or interactive APIs, or machine learning models, that we can all do it in a way that we really respect the trust that members have on us with the privacy of their data. And I'm going to just very quickly share a couple of examples, which is really an area that we have made some progress on. This is as demographics dashboards that we share to our advertisers, but we do it in a way such that they cannot really reconstruct what individual members are doing. And then similarly with a audience engagement API, this is really an API product that provides insights such as, hey, what is the top 10 articles that users liked or comments the most, right? So we are also able to derive the right algorithms, design the right algorithms that is able to protect this as well. And obviously, we not only are making progress, we also share what we do to the community as well. So actually, we just have a paper accepted to NIPS as well this year that is really talking about how can we do practical differential privacy with top case selection, and not only is able to the algorithm, but also thinking about how you can maintain a certain privacy budget as well. As our external partners actually try to get more data from LinkedIn. So That is pretty much all the content that I have, and I think I'm also out of time, so it's very good timing. So just wanted to maybe recollect all the 3 topics that I quickly covered today, which is really about economic graph, it's about fairness, it's about privacy, and the kind of double-clicking on things that I introduced from the very beginning, which is really the mission that and the vision that we have. Is about creating economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And we just cannot achieve that if we do not think about and invest very heavily in fairness and privacy. And this area is still very new, and anything that I've shared today, it's still, you can see that we haven't really achieved much, but we are work in progress. And we really would like to welcome all of you to work in this space. If you have anything that we could leverage as well, let me know. It's a challenging area, but it's also a very important area for us to work on. Thank you.